Okay, well, good evening, and I call the June 4th meeting of the Equity Board to order. And let's see, okay, on the agenda, we don't, never have roll call, but this is now when we do roll call.
Yes.
Okay. And can you assist with that or?
Yeah, would you like me to call everyone's names or just note the excused absences?
Maybe just not the excused.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we're waiting. Kelly let me know that she would be here, so waiting on her. Nisha let me know that she wouldn't be here, and then Karthik also let us know that he would be late due to travel. And then let me see, Kunala also let me know that he would be a bit late as well. So that's it.
Okay, so we might have to squeeze a couple more people around the table at some point. Okay, and then it looks like there is no public comment, and I don't see anyone online or in the room. So we're good on that. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. And I'd like us all to take a moment and scan the minutes in the board packet and kind of note whether there's any kind of corrections that need to be made or not. And when someone is ready, they can make a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve these minutes.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Okay, any discussion, corrections, or feedback needed? All right, I think with that, we can consider the minutes approved. All right, so next item is the chair report, which is our opening question. The purpose of the opening question is to get everyone's voice into the room, because once you get your voice into the room, it's easier to speak up throughout the meeting. And it's also an opportunity for us to get to know each other a little bit better. And so with that, the icebreaker or opening question is, what to you signals the start of summer? And whoever wants to go first, please start and then popcorn it over to the next person. And Thomas and Sarah, you're welcome to participate.
Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, having grown up, I think a lot in the Pacific Northwest. When I start to see the blackberry blossoms, that's usually what signals summer to me, or like roses starting. And if I need to get my fan out.
Yeah. So just
Yeah.
Okay. Couple things. Being able to move my plants outside because they will survive. And then the other thing is just not having to wear sweaters. That's the biggest like trigger for me to be able to be like, it's summertime. Leslie, about you.
I'd say what signals summer to me is when I start seeing all the plants and hanging baskets out at Fred Meyer. That's when I know the weather has officially changed and summer's here. So yeah, and that means I get to play in the dirt too. So yeah, good times. Yeah, this gentleman here.
Yeah, for me, I'm Thomas Holdred, Senior Transportation Planner for the city. Thanks for having me here. For me, my summer starts when I get to go hiking. So it's sort of whenever I get around to planning a hike is when my summer starts. Popcorn. Yeah.
For me, it's when I switch over my winter Birks to my summer Birks. So it's like, that's when I'm like, okay, it's summertime.
what's the difference between them?
I'm glad you asked. Winter Birks are closed. They kind of look like closed Crocs. But then the summer ones are like the 2-strap sandals. It's pretty fun. Cool.
I would say seeing all the pollen flying around the air and then leaving for work in the daylight and then also coming back from work in the daylight.
I'd say like when the sun is still like out at like 9 or like 10 p.m. and like my room's still bright and I don't have to like turn on the light. That like signals that like is here, which I really like.
Yeah, oh, thank you. As a teacher of 29 years and a student for, 16 years, 17 years before that, summer vacation is up. So, and school is done for the year. To me, that's summer. So,
I think the first really good watermelon is like that first bite. Like I'm preemptively buying them now and they're okay, but we're not there yet. So that's my kind of signal for the start of summer. Sarah?
I think I have two. One is when UW's out and like the app is dead in the city of Seattle. That's when I think it's summer, or after Folk Life starts in Seattle, like festival season. I think of summer's festival time. Another one.
No, I think I've left. Okay, for me, it's when we stop having to worry about the cushions being outside in the backyard and having to pull them in, check the forecast like compulsively to make sure they're not getting ruined. All right. So now we're on to the staff reports. And Jillian, do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, just a few brief updates since the last meeting. First, it'll be on all of your July agendas, but there's a reserved spot at Culture Fest for Equity Board. So we can talk about that more at the next meeting. And we had 2 members who were interested in receiving the city's Juneteenth proclamation, which is happening next Monday. So thank you to Leslie and Heather for stepping up on that. So I'll send out the link so everyone can view it live if you want to, and then I'll send out the recording with a timestamp for when it actually happens. You all can view it as well. So that's all I've got.
Great. Okay, well, we are just clipping right along. I think we're well ahead of schedule. So our next item is Thomas Valdres coming to us to talk about the Central Issaquah Station and Alignment Study. Hey, Kelly. And you were here for some of us back in October to kind of also start this off. So we're looking forward to hearing your presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and yeah, appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Equity Board. I met many of you at our little social event for all the new board members, but it's also great to see a lot of the old board members. And yeah, as Preeti mentioned, I was at the Equity Board in October last. I have another thing that I will be bringing up with the Equity Board in a couple months, but I'm excited to chat with you all about this topic. This is a topic that I've mentioned previously. We're here to talk about light rail planning. It's sort of a long marathon sort of planning effort, but this is sort of the latest effort in this long planning journey that we're going together. So this presentation, I'll first give a little bit of background information on the planning activities that we've done over the last decade or so. Talk about the purpose of this discussion, which is a study that we're embarking on beginning in a couple weeks. It's a 18-month project, but I'm hoping to engage with the board along the way. So in a nutshell, the city has been planning for light rail for over a decade. Central Issaquah is a neighborhood of the city. It was designated as a regional growth center, which means that we're expecting the majority of jobs and housing growth through 2050 to be funneled into this one neighborhood. In 2016, many of you may have voted on this, but ST3, Sound Transit 3 ballot measure was approved, and this expands high capacity transit throughout the region. So we can see like downtown Redmond Station just opened last month. And there's other, connective buses that are sort of associated with that. So the goal is to just make transit better, more reliable, and expand that throughout the region. And Issaquah will be the recipient of that in the 2040s. So we're sort of further down the line, but these things do take a lot of money. So it's sort of banking all that cash between now and then, and also construction and all that takes a while. So in 2024, and this was maybe one of the first times that I have engaged with Equity Board. I've been with the city for a couple years, but we started developing some initial plans on sort of how we can think about light rail and working with Sound Transit, who's the decision maker. So we developed a guide for, it's basically our strategy document to say how we're going to work with Sound Transit. And then in April, City Council approved the station area vision and guiding principles. I had taken this item to Equity Board last year, and we sort of talked about some ideas about what the station could look like, how it should feel, and this and that. So that was approved in April. So this is sort of a continuation of that, now looking at potential station locations that we're interested in as a community. So here's some maps. This is Central Issaquah in the black bold. And the Regional Growth Center is a subset of that. This is where the majority of jobs and housing growth is supposed to occur between now and 2050. And I think you can probably see my cursor here, but this is like Costco headquarters. And then the Target is over here, Safeway, et cetera, REI. And then this is like the Issaquah Transit Center, where many of us take the bus into Seattle. This is the expected route of the South Kirkland Issaquah. We're calling it Ski Link. Just get a little bit of mountain branding here, but it is expected to terminate in Central Issaquah, and then it will go through Eastgate over by Bellevue College, and then it'll wrap through the existing stations in Bellevue, and then terminate in South Kirkland. So again, this is one of the first documents that we worked on. This really talks about what is important for a station to be successful from like a just like a ridership perspective, people riding light rail. We also talk about the expected timeline that we think Sound Transit will have based on current information, and the things that we're thinking about as a community in terms of strategic considerations. We are end of the line, so there's going to be different operational things that would be necessary for end of the line versus like something midline on a route. So one of the first things that we learned as we were developing this original document is that we need to take some proactive steps between now and when Sound Transit approaches us. So the first thing was to establish the vision and guiding principles, just to sort of ground ourselves in what it is that we're hoping to get with the station. So this document is pretty extensive. I think it's like 70 pages of just like information that we've gathered. There's a short read on our city website that talks about just in a more crystallized form what the vision and guiding principles are. But it essentially boils down to having a diversity of experiences and uses in the area, having community connections and feeling connected to both the city itself, but then within the neighborhood. And then ultimately it's about having really good transit service and being able to get there in an efficient way. So now we're talking about the station and alignment study. So this is really bridging everything that we've learned so far. Ultimately, the primary deliverable is to have a planning report that we give to Sound Transit. And we can think of this as sort of an advocacy opportunity. We've already defined what the community is hoping to get with a station area. And so now we're looking at which areas around the city would best match the vision and guiding principles that we've talked about so far. So to get here, we're going to study a lot of the existing conditions, what is in the ground today, and then what we're expecting in 2044 by the time that Sound Transit is ready to provide service. And then, using the vision and guiding principles, we're going to create criteria, so like a rubric essentially to score different locations. So we're going to do that in advance so that we're not like sort of fitting it. We want to make sure that upfront we're talking about how we would score projects, and then we would look at up to 6 locations and then ultimately prefer one, which we're calling the locally preferred alternative. So I would love to bring the equity board along as we're doing this project. It's 18 months. So here we are at the beginning. We haven't even kicked off the project yet, but I would love to continue bringing this topic to the equity board, potentially in the 4th quarter of this year, if not a little bit earlier, hoping to develop some criteria that we can then use for alternative analysis to score different locations. So this is the rough timeline. It could change. We haven't kicked the project off, but this is essentially what we think it'll look like. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions or address any comments you have.
Any questions or comments for Thomas? I do. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of history in our area around this type of planning, I guess. Do you know what the likelihood is of Sound Transit accepting the preferred location?
Yeah, so developing a preferred location is really, the idea came from what other cities and other jurisdictions have done. So this is a proven tactic. And it may not be that we get exactly what we ask for, but by defining what we're hoping to get, and that's sort of, it grounds us in this is like locally what we want. Sound Transit as a regional entity has their own priorities. But if we're saying up front, this like the options that you provide us should meet our preferences, we can sort of meet in the middle or potentially get a little bit closer to what we want. So I don't know that any agency has gotten exactly defined exactly what they want, but the goal of this project isn't to do all the work that Sound Transit already has to do. We're just trying to give them a goalpost, and this is ultimately the vision that we have. So we'd love to have something that meets this as close as possible.
And then, so it sounds like the siting decision has a lot of equity implications, for who benefits from being close to transit, businesses who are close, all of those things. And so I would expect that it would play a pretty big part in your rubric development.
It will. Yeah, equity is super important. Many cities are playing catch up where they hadn't considered equity at the onset. And so there's a lot of unintended consequences that can come with that. So we're trying to build it in before we even kick this off. And ultimately, it's not the city's decision where the station goes, but we're trying to advocate for something that's going to like be the best option for us and advocate as hard as we can. Yeah.
Thomas, I didn't come to the meeting in October, but I'm wondering, was there any communication or feedback from any of the bus users on the 554 and the other buses that travel, just to see what they were thinking in terms of location and preferences? Because I'm assuming that those are the maybe some of the people that they're targeting to this transit.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, the meeting that we had in October was about the vision and guiding principles. So just generally like what we're hoping to get with a station, how it should feel like in terms of like how useful transit is and all that. As part of that process, we did do I think it was like a 8-month outreach. We did a community survey that was taken by like 800 respondents. Went to a lot of meetings. I met with the youth advisory board, which was in the library here. So we did all these outreach events. I myself am a transit user, and I met with transit riders as part of this. There's a group that represents the East Side. It's like a East Side Easy Rider group. I think that's what they're called, EERC. So I met with them. We like talked about this. They had some folks on the on some focus groups that we did. We did try to reach out to a lot of transit riders, but there's so many more voices that we could have gotten. Always open to like talking to people about this topic. But yeah, moving forward with this project, we do have an outreach plan that is very similar. And if anybody has connections, would love to chat with anybody about this topic.
Any other questions or comments for Thomas?
Quick question, because Redmond just finished theirs, so are you partnering in like closely with them as well to kind of see like their wins and because a little bit I'm familiar with the folks that kind of did that, and so I know a lot of it was on a time crunch because a lot of the focus was because of the World Cup coming and for the businesses to boom and all of that. So I'm just wondering like what's currently Issaquah's perspective on that. Like, I love the proactiveness. I'm just curious about like, you know, is the focus to also expedite in order to kind of have this big plan and kind of like make it appealing for other folks to come and, you know, kind of visit us too.
Yeah, I think the city's stance is that we want it as soon as possible. Sound Transit has said they can deliver it as early as 2041. That was in 2016. And as we've seen, there's been some setbacks for other projects. So we would love it as soon as 2041. But they've also said if financially constrained, which looks like, you know, might be the case, the latest they would do is 2044. So I guess to that end, we are hoping to get it as soon as possible, but it's likely within that timeline. For Redmond, we work with Redmond staff all the time. We're learning about their, you know, perspective on like working with Sound Transit. Through this project and through the development of the light rail planning guide, we met with many city staff and also like Snohomish County that is working on their Everett station. Yeah, we're constantly chatting with people about like sort of how it went and like things we can learn from. So that's always part of our development. And yeah, if you have any ins with Redmond, would love to chat with them.
Yeah, possibly.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just curious because I'm not sure if you had conversations about the equity concerns that they had with because of like timeline and then like the crunch. And then like it becomes an afterthought a lot of times in any big development projects of like, oh, here are the unintended consequences that we can't really fix anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like if you've had those conversations with them, just like because I see that, you know, you're bringing it up like many, you know, like really being proactive about it.
Yeah, I did meet, I'll just add to that idea. I did meet with Redmond, I think it was like 6 months ago or so. They received a grant through like, I think it was Bloomberg Philanthropies. They did a whole study on like sort of the business displacement and the residential displacement concerns related to their light rail station. And they did a whole like study. I think it's maybe on their website, but they really studied ways that the city can like try to affect change in those areas. And they have a couple like policy things that they've looked at. But it's really great that they did that work. We can learn from that and try to incorporate that. And yeah, I think we're benefiting from being sort of the last one served. We can try to incorporate lessons learned, but it is a constantly moving target. So we want to like keep educated on these issues. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I think, okay, any final? All right, thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll look forward to hearing more from you in the next few months. Yeah. And so I think, Jillian, you're gonna tee up the Evans Consulting Group.
Yes, absolutely. I'll ask Sarah to join me here at the table, and you all have also noticed a couple of folks joining online because they have one of their probably last classes going on right now. Thanks.
Last classes.
Yes, they're near the end.
Thank you for having us back. It says only organizers and presenters can share.
Okay, let me go
You could
ahead.
make me
and-
presenter really quick,
Yeah.
then I can.
If that doesn't work, I can share.
Yes, we graduate next week, exactly 1 week, so.
Wow.
We're very close. If I seem very out of it, that's why. It's not you, it's me.
You should be good
Okay,
to share now.
Julian. See. Beautiful.
Do we want to do a quick sound check with the folks on Teams?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, Jordan?
Jordan, can you say something?
Yes, and I am here with Maria and Maury as well. So we are all on separate video, but we'll be using my audio. So first checking to make sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Me too.
Perfect. Yep.
Yes.
Me?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful.
Carter.
Hi, can you hear me?
Amazing.
Sweet.
Good call. Sound check as always. Yeah, so it shouldn't be too much of your time. I think Julian's gonna introduce a little bit of this, a follow-up from what we talked about last time. So keep that in your brains as we dig into this.
Yeah, so we've returned to this group probably for the final time, or definitely for the final time with the Evans School group on the Board and Commission equity assessment. You'll probably be hearing from me throughout the summer or fall on some of the implementation of this, but this is the follow-up and kind of closing the loop from the last meeting, noting what was changed due to your recommendations and feedback, and kind of dipping into next steps and going through the feedback that we'll talk about in a moment. So we'd love to hear a little bit from all of you on prioritizing the recommendations and what should be standard for all boards and commissions versus kind of ad hoc depending on the board or commission. And those are the policy questions there for you. So as we go through this, just keep in mind that as the city is thinking about the resource constraints that the city might be facing, thinking about staff capacity, what are the most important things for the city to be pursuing from the list of recommendations? And then, like I said, I'm sorry, that policy question isn't quite right. It should be what you would, sorry, I just want to make sure it's the right PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's the one we had.
Okay.
I'm happy to just.
Okay, no worries. Which recommendation should be standard for all boards versus selected based on the board? Not a problem. It's all good.
There we go. I don't know if it'll update on there, but we'll find out. All right, well,
Okay.
well, that's okay. I'll update it on the last slide.
Can you go to the next slide?
Of course.
Thanks. Okay, so I'll hand it back actually to the Evans School to talk through their research, and then we'll have about half the time to talk through to discuss the policy questions.
All right, so I think most of you have heard our spiel before, but once again, we did a lot of research, and from our kind of core findings, specifically from our literature review, we found how actively creating inclusive spaces with diverse voices is really critical for equitable. So we took that in combination with what we've heard in interviews with you all on boards, with city staff, with folks in other cities, and tried to focus on 3 core areas of best practices and recommendations. So we have structure and governance. How does the board literally operate? Diversity and representation, and inclusion and engagement. So what does it look like to be on the board and be part of that experience? Any questions on our areas of focus? We'll dive into our recommendations. So I want to just go over all these at once, actually. So our recommendations, we went over a lot of them with you all last time. We heard from you kind of around what some priorities are. We did some deep thinking around deeper thinking, I should say, around that gap analysis and how we might prioritize some of these. And we really wanted to think about, do you have the wrong deck? I'm sorry, Julian, this isn't my fault. That's okay. The diversity and representation is really the big one we want to highlight here. So reducing barriers to board participation, including streamlined application processes. I know we talked about that with you all, as well as some inclusive outreach and messaging. The next area we really thought about was inclusion. So what are some additional onboarding processes that we can think about? Again, we heard from a lot of new folks this meeting, as well as in our other interviews, and even from other cities, that onboarding could be more consistent, a little bit either more extensive, different options. Just every board does it a little bit differently, and that's something we really recommend doing across all boards. We next have standardizing kind of just a baseline equity training. Again, we've seen that all boards receive something a little bit different in this context. And so we just want to make sure everyone has kind of a shared understanding of equity and kind of how it might apply to their board work. Now, beyond that standardized training, there may be different things that different boards need. But again, we really focus on what are things that we can do across kind of all boards, all groups to really get folks on the same page. So we're able to have more substantive conversations about their own policy areas, et cetera, later on. And then lastly, this is much less applicable for you all, but thinking about some clarity around guidelines for liaisons. So folks like Jillian here, what is their role? How can they support members? Be that onboarding, after onboarding, and then how can they help to facilitate some of that communication between boards and commissions, the mayor, city council? That was something we heard from interviews. Again, we talked about that a little bit last time as well. And what do those feedback loops look like? So trying to codify some of that a little bit more. Any questions on these? We're going to kind of dive into each of these sections a little bit more. So, yeah, beautiful. All right, so the first one I have is reducing barriers to board participation, and I'm going to let my team jump in here.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Everyone can hear me okay? Yes. So for each of those prioritized recommendations, we sort of broke it down by what is the best practice that we found through our research, and we contextualized them for what it looks like in Issaquah right now. For this one, reducing barriers to board participation, we have a couple of best practices to highlight. The first best practice to highlight is just that making the application as easily accessible as possible is important. Within Issaquah, we heard that the application was challenging for some, and there was some staff perception that applicants needed support to complete it online. There was also a sense that perhaps people feel their knowledge or experience might be a barrier keeping them from applying. So an idea for improvement related to this is just to try and simplify the application process. This could look like revising for plain language where appropriate, providing alternative formats, or providing some how-to videos on being able to directly access the online application. Another best practice related to this recommendation is to offer a stipend. In Issaquah, this is something that exists. So we found that Issaquah is offering a stipend and to those making less than 100% of the AMI. There was some feedback that this availability could perhaps be communicated more clearly. So something to consider. And an idea for improvement that might help make this more beneficial just for a diverse group of people is differentiating the way compensation is offered by adding in some options beyond just the typical stipend.
Thanks, Maury. As Sarah mentioned, one of the other big areas where we saw a best practice was just having standardization around the baseline equity training. So I will dive into this a little bit more in terms of what we saw best practice-wise in other cities and what Issaquah is currently doing. So it was really based in other cities having a shared understanding of equity principles and an understanding of how the city thinks about and applies those principles in its work at large. This often meant having a shared definition of key terms such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and understanding of the systems and structures that have created inequities in the US institutions and in the specific communities, and knowledge of the city's current equity work and having access and that shared understanding across boards and commissions. In practice, this often looked like standardized trainings or workshops for all members and having the same information shared to those members and these same kind of consistent resources. In Issaquah, we found with our interviews with board and commission members and staff that equity trainings and resources have been inconsistent, with approximately half of those we interviewed sharing they had not undergone any equity training. Members also shared that they perceived that within their boards, there may be some dissimilar or inconsistent understandings of what was meant when they talked about equity and a lack of clear definitions around those key terms. When asked about their prior knowledge of equity, kind of across various members in the boards, there was a high variability in terms of the level of experience that people came in with prior to joining the boards. Some shared that they had almost no prior experience or kind of a deep understanding of equity, whereas others shared that they had vast experience from lived experience, their education, and professional training. So kind of inconsistent entry points and then supports once on the boards. Given all of this grounding, kind of one of our big key recommendations is that standardized equity training that all board and commission members participate in, which could be integrated into a centralized onboarding process. And then sharing those resources and having that training available either online or sent out through emails to board and commission members so that it is easily referenced in the future. With that, I will pass it to Carter.
Hi, hello. I'm going to be talking about our third recommendation that's on our priority list, which is additional onboarding options for new members. We did find that Issaquah currently has a centralized onboarding process with similar training, overview role, and time to connect with new members. However, we did also find that there's an inconsistency across the support for new members to have, and other cities do have a support system. And that's why we would like to recommend a few different things, which is creating a welcome packet. And this just is providing members with a digital or physical key documents, facts, contact info, and current benefits, for example, info on the stipend, and a welcome letter. Other things we believe will be extremely beneficial that goes along with this is establishing different onboarding tracks, which I believe the Equity Board does have, but having that go across all the other ones as well. Yeah. That's number 3.
Great. Thanks so much, Carter. So for the final recommendation that we have, this goes back to the structure and governance topic, is to clarify and standardize guidelines for liaison roles, as Sarah had noted at the start. So what we heard from other cities as part of our interviews was that they offer consistent guidance, expectations, and standards so that liaisons are really best equipped to support their boards and commissions. What we heard from our very limited Issaquah interviews with staff liaisons was that there may be some variability and flexibility in kind of their expectations and understanding of the board liaison role. So perhaps an opportunity to further dig in, but also to kind of take that word and look at some ways to like embed some new improvements. So similar guidance around kind of that standardization, just ensuring that everyone's operating and working off of kind of that same basis. So perhaps designing some sort of guidance document for all the liaisons. Within that, kind of having a shared sense of definitions. So for example, when it comes to equity and equity practices, ensuring that everyone's using the same sort of language to be able to kind of speak the same and represent Issaquah in the same way. And then the last one I'll highlight here is perhaps offer orientations or onboarding refreshers on an ongoing basis. So perhaps annually for staff liaisons, just ensuring again that, you know, everyone's up to speed, we're all refreshed, or everyone in the group is refreshed as to like where things are at and operating in very similar ways. So I think these are probably some of the key ones, and you can see there are a few additional areas for improvement that we've also outlined here on the slide. So those are the core recommendations we wanted to share today. And I think that will bring us back to those couple of questions that we had. So Jillian or Sarah, back to you.
Let me reshare with the right questions for once really quick. Again, my brain. It's me, not you. Okay. Here we go. So back to our policy questions, which is, are there any of these that feel like really sticky, important? You know, hey, you've made 6 recommendations, but I think this one should be where you focus your time first. Obviously, you want to do all these, but where should you focus your time first? And then, you know, we think all these should be standardized across boards, but again, are there any where you think this definitely needs to be standardized, or anything else that we didn't talk about today that has been on your mind that you'd want to see?
Is it possible for you to put the 6 recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Here we go.
I think personally, to me, the equity training, standardized, even if it's a video that they have to watch, and then some kind of in-person. I think having common language as you're using the word, because we still see the people confusing equity and equality. And so everyone is coming from the same place.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really important. Another one, like within the onboarding process, I think the welcome packet with like all the necessary information about the board and like informing people about like the stipends is also really important. So that they have like just one place to know about the board and like how to get involved with it. I think that's also.
Thank you.
One thing for me that I think it's kind of connected to the liaison role as well as the baseline equity training. I think that with equity training, a lot of it focuses on kind of like, so definitions, common language, and maybe some self-reflection. And I think that oftentimes is really hard to translate into like policy specific work. And so while I think a baseline training is great, I think it's not sufficient to actually grapple with transportation policy or housing policy or things like that. So I think there could be a baseline, like standard baseline, and also something that's a little bit more customized for the board and commission. So that's kind of where that variation could be. But I also think the role of the liaison in terms of equity could be to be more of that expert between equity and that policy area. And so maybe they could help support the board training or, you know, coach if that's appropriate for liaisons into doing that. So they get that intersection of equity and that policy expertise.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely not. And I think we don't envision, you know, as a one and done, right? It's obviously an ongoing process for all of us everywhere we are. But it's, you know, where can we get a couple things going? And then, yeah, to your point, now that we have a little bit more information, how can we take that to like reflect on ourselves and use that self-knowledge too, for sure.
The other standardization opportunities or prioritization here?
I would have to agree with the onboarding processes, having everything be standardized so we all have kind of like a common language. I mean, it's like maybe we could add like supplementary stuff as far as like, sorry, my brain's also a little foggy today. Especially for streamlining the application process and having, maybe trying to think of like different materials as well. Like people who might be limited in their sight, are there accessible options for them to be able to onboard? So
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the idea of like creating like different ways in which people can engage, because to your point, not everyone's the same. I can't necessarily just hand someone, I might be able to hand a welcome packet. They're good to go. Some people might have more questions, more needs, it's, everyone is a little bit different. Yeah, good point.
think-
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm kind of like still forming the idea in my head and it's kind of based on what you were saying. So I apologize if it's what you said and I'm just repeating it in a different way. But kind of like, because the boards are different, right? Like you want to standardize the equity training, for example, right? That everyone takes. And then another layer of that is, can we have a way where they look at the community that they're serving specifically through the lens of their board, right? Because like transportation equity looks different than sister cities equity and stuff. So like, is there a way to kind of like make it a little bit more customizable, but also keeping it like, standard across the board? I don't know have the answer. It's kind of like after what you said, I was thinking about that.
If I were to add on to that, just I think for certain policy areas, there's probably known inequities that are built in. And so to daylight those and what that means for Issaquah specifically, right? So you don't have to reinvent that kind of background every time you talk about something.
Right, I mean, you guys were just talking about with transportation, like other cities are doing it, there's common equity concerns, so I think that is totally possible.
I believe Issaquah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, Carter, finish what you're gonna say. I was gonna take us on a tangent.
I was just gonna comment, I believe Issaquah does do equity specific transportation training as well. And
Yes.
I do believe that our we do recommend additional to that inside of our bigger document under 2C for the recommendations is to also implement policy specific equity training. That way we can make sure to get a good round experience and we're not missing anything.
Yes, thank you, Carter. Yeah, the transportation liaison created kind of a separate training for them, and that's one of the things we definitely modeled this recommendation off of.
I was just gonna reflect on the online application and definitely having different ways to apply, because I do wonder if our seniors, if we have far fewer seniors who apply to be on boards and commissions because of the online application.
Would you think like paper or a phone call or something more tangible like that?
Yeah, or like just, some people, typing or writing, and some people maybe don't have the dexterity, so maybe they can do something over the phone, even as that initial application.
Yeah, I would even say, like at the farmer's market, have a booth there and introduce everyone to the boards and commissions.
Yeah. Flyers around Issaquah or any city.
Oh my God, you just get your beautiful faces out there as advertisements.
I can't speak much on this, but I know for like the guidelines from the license rules, like it definitely varies, like for this board and like the youth advisory board. So I don't know if that would be like standardized, like like the basic equity training for that role would be like important, but I know like maybe that would take time because it's very different for what like a license do on that board versus this board.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, so what I'm hearing as I kind of think through this and think about what implementation looks like, I'm hearing a clear preference to think about kind of from last time as well, how people get to the city's boards and commissions, right? How they learn about the application, what are the barriers to application through our application process. And then also front loading the onboarding, right? Like those feel like the highest areas of focus is what I'm hearing from this group.
So the training.
And the training, yes, sorry, that the onboarding, sorry, the training,
That's
yes, yes, yeah.
I don't know if we took a lot off the list.
I don't even know if that's
All of it is off the list. I think it's just
thinking through the fact that the next like big cycle will be in a little bit less than a year. I think that gives us a clear path, right? To spend this next year thinking about those portions of this process. And then returning to this document in a year and seeing what's next.
I would say, I think there's also some small wins, like if you can't get all the way, like as part of an onboarding packet. I know, like you and Dale had brought the glossary, that document. So you have stuff that could be part of an onboarding packet ahead of like a structured training to even start orienting people to common phrases and things.
I also think all parts are important because one is how to bring people in, how to get people to participate, and then how to keep people in. And it's 3 different parts to me. And so I think you need all 3 so that you're attracting the people, they're able to give their voice, and then they don't leave because they know how to, they have that information to be retained into this work.
I would just say just one kind of final thought, because I mean, for me, clearly I prioritize equity. I don't know if members of other boards and commissions prioritize it maybe as much as we would, so I think there's this balance too, like how much of, like, I think there's a danger of equity overtaking other things, which again, is fine with me, but finding the balance, right? And that might be conversations with the different liaisons and boards.
And that'll probably be sussed out a little bit through the standardization process and just understanding where is the highest need to have, for example, specific equity trainings, that kind of a thing.
And that's like, what is the minimum they need to know versus like the extras? Yeah.
Okay, I think I have pretty good feedback on mine, and I know the Evans School they're wrapping up. So we can maybe go to the next step slide. I can share a little bit of.
see if I yeah. This one I have, I might have the wrong one though.
Okay.
Apologize.
No worries, I can just speak to it.
Okay.
So we're going to be prioritizing these recommendations as well, to look through maybe more of those like governance or liaison sections and see what should be prioritized, and come up with some kind of implementation plan that might come back to all of you this summer or fall. For your feedback. I also want to note that we're still working on the larger equity assessment work that this is kind of one piece of. So the equity team had their first review of the RFP this week, and we're going in a slightly different direction to try and get the most for our money. So we'll be rewriting that and hopefully getting you something to see by either July or August of this year to provide some feedback on the deliverables in that assessment RFP. So that's where we're going, both with this very specific work and with the larger project as a whole.
Awesome. Well, thank you as always, all of you, for your time and effort and contributions. We obviously couldn't have done this without you all. So yeah, we really appreciate it. Hopefully, something that the city can think about and reference. If not, at least we've had to have some lovely discussions and kind of get our brains thinking about it. So either way, appreciate the time and yeah, thank you. And I have to run to work, so I'm gonna leave, but I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Tori.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Again, from the Evans School, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. Jillian, it was great working with you.
You all as well.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. All right, we are just clipping along here. So the last item on the agenda of significance, I would say, is the chair and vice chair annual election. It happens like the month following the beginning or the onboarding, I guess, of new members. So here we are. And do you want to kick us off? Jill?
Yeah, so similar to previous years, the staff liaison facilitates this just because we have an active chair, right? So that's why I'll be facilitating this. I'm gonna walk through the process, and then we'll kind of get into the actual nominating discussion and voting. So I have a couple of notes here just because I don't want to get any of this wrong. So starting off with nominations, we'll treat chair and vice chair separately, and we'll start with nominations for the chair role. Anyone can nominate anyone, including themselves. Unless you're an alternate, you're not eligible to serve in the chair or vice chair role, but you are eligible to make nominations. If there is only one nomination for either of the roles, then it's considered unanimous consent that that person takes that role. If there is more than one nomination for any of these roles, then we'll move into a discussion. We'll close nominations and move into a discussion phase. In boards that I've worked with in the past, it's been helpful to keep this as kind of like a strengths-based conversation about what any one person might bring to the board in that role. I'll kind of be monitoring to see when discussion dies down and we can move into voting. We'll vote in the order that nominations were made. So whoever is nominated first, will vote on first. You can only vote for one person for each of the roles. So if, let's say there are 2 nominations and you want to actually vote for the second person for chair, you have to vote no on the first person. So it'll be a roll call vote that we'll do. So I'll go ahead and say your name and you'll provide your vote. And then it's majority to be elected. I also know that we have one member who, at least one member who is not here with us. They are eligible to be nominated and elected, and we can kind of go through that if that happens, like what that process looks like a little bit. Are there any questions on how this is going to work? No? Okay. Then I think we'll start off with the call for nominations. Kelly?
And this is for the chair position.
Yeah, sorry, this is for the chair position. Thank you.
I would like to nominate Leslie. Her voice is not, she doesn't speak a lot, but when she speaks, it closes, it kind of makes all of our viewpoints come together. And so, and she has the longevity in the organization. And I just think she.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. Thank you. And Jillian, do we need a second for the nominations?
Let me see. Yeah, let's have a second for the nomination.
I will second it.
Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? Okay, seeing none, Leslie, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, just gonna take a few notes here. We'll move on now to the vice chair role. Are there any nominations?
I will not nominate Karthik, even though he's not here.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
I second.
Okay. All right, do we have any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, so seeing none, Karthik has been also elected to the vice chair position. So how this will work, we'll let Karthik know. And then if for any reason he wants to change his mind or refuse the nomination and election, we would just repeat the voting process at the next meeting. So not a big deal. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You're even sitting in the right spot.
The chair goes to the door.
Although you may want to move over here. Dale always had me stationed here for the mic. So.
You know what? Then so shall it be, Madam Chair. Going forward.
All right. Well, I don't know if there's other business, Jillian, that you wanted to mention.
No, I'll just note that something I forgot to note, the chair position is, the chair and vice chair roles are 1 year, so you'll both serve until May of 2026. So.
And before we end the meeting, I'd like to thank Priti for being an amazing chair this past year. We appreciate your leadership and the way you challenged us to think more about the different topics presented.
Absolutely. Here, here.
have official, I'm gonna consider it under other business, but rather than having a closing thought, I wanted to offer it up to Leslie for any comments as incoming chair.
Thank you very much again for your leadership, and thank you all for entrusting me after I guess about a year of being on the equity board in a role of chair. I certainly take this as a responsibility that I want to kind of honor and make sure that I am being a great facilitator and have the ability to learn from everyone here. What I love about this board and this group is that we look like Issaquah. And that makes me feel really good. And so for me, I want to make sure that we're continuing on with the very great undertaking of continuing the mission that we have, which is obviously to continue to support and cultivate the voices of the diverse communities of Issaquah, which we represent, and we're honored to kind of continue that work going forward. In terms of goals, I was thinking about what do I want to do for my next year, and if I was kind of honored and being chair in terms of kind of goals for the next year. And it's really continuing to support the hardworking city staff liaisons that do all of the yeoman's work and present us information to where we can make great decisions and support the city. I certainly want to continue to work affording the equity work plan in 2025. I think it's great work there, and I'm pretty excited about some great initiatives that are coming up for the summer. I think it's important for us to increase the visibility of the equity board to really, make sure that people know about what we do and the great work that is, and, educate more about, who we are and kind of grow from there. And I think it's important for what I do as a profession and just within this group for us to continue to recruit and to develop within as far as equity board members already on the board and also those that would like to join this group eventually. So I think it's very important to replace ourselves with highly talented and motivated people. So I'm honored and I look forward to working with all of you guys in this capacity. So thank you.
I will say that Karthik is online, so I don't know, Leslie, if you'd like to share the news.
I can.
Yeah, Karthik.
Hey, Karthik, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, Karthik, you were nominated as vice chair and it was unanimous, so congratulations, vice
Oh, wow. All right, well, thank you so much. Delighted to hear it.
Yeah, and Karthik, would you have a few words you might share as we wrap up the meeting?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm still in the airport. A bit of background here. Hopefully it's not too distracting.
No, you're fine.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, a couple of things. I think I'd love to, just following on from what was shared, I'd love to be able to bring in some practices within our group itself that can foster equity around our communications, around our sort of stories that we bring, the different life experiences that we bring into the space, and use that as a way to guide us in how we interact with the different departments of the city. The second is around data and how we gather data, how we communicate that data, and that includes not just sort of quantitative data, but also qualitative. I think in the last year and a half or so on the board, we've seen so many examples of how just understanding what the inequities are in our community requires, looking at some sort of data, and there's not that much data out there. So trying to figure out, or at least suggest ways to gather and collate and digest and distill that data to the city is something I'd love to work together with the board on. I think those are two that are front of mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Karthik.
Thank you.
Well, as we adjourn, I just want to say I have been honored to be the chair for the past 2 years, and I'm delighted with the new leadership and chair and vice chair. And so I'm excited to sit back and just participate as a board member. And so with that, I would adjourn this June meeting for the equity board, and our next meeting is scheduled for July 2nd under Leslie's leadership. Thank you all.
Thank you.